allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have some changes to the agenda. We're going to add, Mr. Campbell, you want to add the fire department request? Do we have anything in writing on that?
We do not.
Okay. So under discussion, there's a request from the fire department regarding water metering and connection. Is there any other changes to the agenda? Mr. Morrow?
Mayor, I'd like to have, as a discussion item, a brief talk about the Oakwood Cemetery Task Force and reconvening that, hopefully sometime in January.
Any other changes to the agenda? If not, do we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Morrow, second. Roth? We don't have any absences tonight. We have a presentation of a
Mayor,
plaque.
we need to vote on that
Oh,
motion.
sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. I think I was looking forward to all these opportunities to thank people. So, we have a presentation of a plaque to a former council member, Glenn Law. Come up. You want to bring your family? You guys just come on up. You know, that he wouldn't have been such a great council member without your support. Come on. No? So this is a plaque. Glenn's been a long-serving council member and former mayor pro tem for the city for a long time, and we're really going to miss him. We did a plaque. It's okay. You're going to, anyhow. He's teaching up in Marquette, right? He's in Menominee, a really long way, so he couldn't stay on council. We really miss him. But we're really glad he's got this great job teaching. Whereas Glenn Law has served the city of Saline as a council member from January 5th, 2004 through September 24th, 2011, and as mayor pro tem for the year 2007. Whereas during the past 7 years, Glenn Law has served the city as a member of board delegate to the following: Celtic Festival Committee, the Parks Commission, the Planning Commission, the Saline Area Fire Executive Board as an alternate, the Special Projects Commission, the Saline Youth Council, the Winterfest Committee, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. And whereas Glenn Law's skill, compassion, understanding, leadership, and dedication to public service have helped to make Saline a better place to live. Therefore, be it resolved that the Saline City Council, on behalf of the citizens of Saline, do hereby thank Glenn Law for his many contributions to the welfare of our community, with sincere best wishes for continued success in all his future endeavors. And there isn't something on here that is near and dear to all of us in the community, which is our ice rink that we can't skate on today, but you know that everybody that is going to skate on that ice rink always will think of you and all the contributions you made on all the different levels in the community. So we really appreciate it, your services, congratulations, and you know, actually, selfishly, we're hoping that he finds a job closer in the future, so we can, because he's been a really fantastic volunteer in the community. So, congratulations.
I've heard that click all the time when I'm up there. Now I know what it's like to be down here. I did submit my letter when I first heard about the job and accepted it. And I felt it wasn't appropriate, really, just to not say anything except through a letter. And I wanted to personally, when I had the chance, to come up and thank everyone for helping me. I'm not going to take any much more time because I know you have a lot on your agenda. I certainly want to thank God. I certainly want to thank my family, of course, Lori and Sarah, who have been supportive for me for the 8 years, almost 8 years I've been on council. As you know, as an elected position, it doesn't come without sacrifice from the family. And certainly I want to thank all the council members that I've served with, both past and present. The city staff, second to none, outstanding, beyond anything I can say. But certainly most of all, I want to thank the citizens in the city of Saline who supported me for the many years that I was on council. You learn a lot about things, and I certainly learned my share. I learned how large recently this state is by driving it, and so I certainly am appreciative of the opportunity I have in Menominee, but I also want to say that Saline is my home and always will be. Even though I'm from Canada, I still say that this is my true home. So thank you so much.
Our next presentation is for our retiring DPW worker. Could you come up, please? I'd like to say, I maybe should have the microphone, but congratulations on your retirement. This is this really big plaque because Vicki has served the community for 32 years as one of our DPW members, employees, and done a great job. And we're really going to miss you driving the street sweeper and all the big trucks, and decorating the truck for the holiday parade, and just, you know, you've been a real stalwart, steady employee for the city for a very long time. We're really going to miss your service to our community. And also, I think I don't know, has there ever been another female employee in DPW? So that's pretty tough. You know, you're definitely a minority, and so appreciate all your hard work. And congratulations, here's your plaque.
Thank you
And I
very
don't know
much.
if you'd like to say a few words?
Well, first I'd like to thank all the citizens.
Closer to you.
Thank all the citizens of Saline. It's been great. It's been fantastic working here. Second, to the kids, they're amazing, waving every day. I'm going to miss that the most. And last but not least, the guys at the DPW, they accepted me for who I am, took me in as one of the guys. I will miss them tremendously. Everybody, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next presentation is Sandy Rupp, with the President and CEO of United Way for Washtenaw County. He's going to talk about the program. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members, and thank you, audience members. I'm sorry that I have my back to you, but I'm really privileged and honored to be here this evening to just give you an update about what I call the brave new world of coordinated funding that United Way of Washtenaw County, the Washtenaw County, and the City of Ann Arbor and Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation have engaged and embarked upon. And then I'd also like to give you an update of the progress of United Way helping to build local communities. I've left you, council members, a packet there of information that could be your bedtime reading. So I'll just sort of go through some of the high points here. I know you have a very busy agenda this evening. But before I start, I really would like to just give a shout out here and a salute for Lee's past support and help with United Way, and to you too, Mayor Gretchen, for becoming involved and being involved with United Way of Washtenaw County, and in fact joining our board of directors. A statistic I'd like to bring to you is this. Since 2006, donors that have given to United Way of Washtenaw County have invested a total of $467,000 in Saline to address health and human service needs. Our current support is $62,259 annually. And for context for you, from monies from the United Way Community Investment Fund, there are only 8 other agencies across the whole county receiving an annual amount higher than this from United Way. So you can see how much we treasure our partnership with Saline Social Services and the needs that are here in Saline. Beginning in 2010, United Way volunteers, City of Ann Arbor volunteers, county volunteers, a team of 15 Blue Ribbon Panel folks started looking at a way that perhaps a better way to coordinate planning and coordinate grants for nonprofits across the county. And of course, the issue of declining donations, individual donations, plant closures, economic climate certainly began to drive this discussion. And because of the long-standing relationship that we'd had with Dexter, Milan, and Saline, known formally as affiliates, that the board voted to set aside an amount of $170,000 to ensure that continued resources would be coming to those three communities, now joined by a fourth community, Manchester. So we wanted you to have secure and continued funding, not going through the typical allocation process, since there was a lot of new things happening. We wanted you to have the assurance that we cared enough for the annual contribution. I guess what I wanted to do tonight was to give you just a few highlights about coordinated funding and why I think it's a good advantage, and I hope that I will gain your support. This is a 2-year pilot in our county and City of Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County. But in our initial review of Saline and your needs here, we were surprised to find that 906 of your community members have an open case pending with the Department of Human Services in February of 2011. So I think that is a surprising amount of people, and probably the clock has ticked upward for more people needing help. So now, if we could, Council, and I apologize to you too, but I can read through this very quickly, and I just want to let you know that some of the desired long-term outcomes that we're looking for to continue with coordinated funding, and let me be clear, these are not tax dollars mixed up with private donations. Each of the entities, the county, the city, rural county, United Way of Washtenaw County, and Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, have control of their own funds. This is about collaborating, cooperating, and agreeing on a North Star approach for county planning. And we believe that that will bring about more efficient deployment of grant dollars when we are fortunate enough to find grant dollars that come through federal, state coffers into the county to be dispersed. We believe, too, it will strengthen our local nonprofit sector, and it will make it easier for the nonprofit sector who in the past have had to do countless applications, countless counting of outcomes, and answering questions that weren't always standardized for funders. This took away from their ability to deliver the best of services, so we believe it's a favor to the agencies. We also believed it preserved the public funds in order to perhaps drive in more grant dollars, and also provided a more collaborative environment for both agencies and funders. So how it works is very simple. The county and the city and United Way of Washtenaw County dedicated as much as possible to what we call basic needs. That involves delivery of food, access to health care, taking care of preschool children, providing seniors for home-delivered meals. So all of those areas, shelter, that we call basic needs, there were 6 of them. That is where the largest bulk of money is going, and United Way today remains the largest funder of those basic needs at $2.5 million annually. Now, programs and capacity building began to be a problem in that we felt good agencies were without funds to sometimes look at merging, consolidating services, or becoming more efficient. So the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation and United Way also took on an annual allocation for agencies to apply for capacity building grants. So the challenges we've had to date There were a lot of agency fears, a lot of feeling of losing of their autonomy, a lot of feeling that things were slipping away from them to ensure their services were delivered. The planning and coordination when you work with governmental entities provide different than a private nonprofit like United Way. We found different. We weren't used to contracts. We were used to memorandums. So we found a new and different way to work with our governmental friends. The communications, both internal and external, have been difficult to describe coordinated funding to reassure folks that tax dollars are not mixed up with their donations. There were cultural differences among funders that we had to sit down at a table and basically, really talk about. Governmental is very much on outcomes. It's around a contractual agreement. We probably work with agencies longer to hopefully get them back on track. There were also obviously limited staff resources, as everyone is dealing with, and greater public exposure to this asks for more accountability and transparency. So those were some of the challenges, but we do have some successes to date. We believe we have now shared community goals to let no one go hungry, to let no one go without shelter, to let no little child sit outside Hope Clinic with a toothache for 4 hours hoping to get in. So we have all of these wonderful shared community goals. We have better feedback mechanisms now from agencies where they feel free to call us if there are issues and problems. We work in an atmosphere of helping to resolve the problem. We call it SIN, solve it now. We have shared funder practices and expertise, we believe, greater community responsiveness, and greater public exposure. And part of that greater public exposure is the ability that I feel so grateful for that you allowed me to come here tonight in the midst of your very, very busy schedule and agenda right before the holidays. And just to reassure you that when I walk away tonight, what would make me really happy is if you had any questions, you'd feel free to ask me and you'd feel free to call me, or you could ask Gretchen to call me too, she has my email, and that you would all have a very happy holiday. But I would be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions from any council members?
So you all support it, right? Yeah. And you will for another year, right? Right. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Sandy. Okay, we have citizen comments now. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on items that appear on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Do we have any citizen comments? If not, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move to adopt as submitted.
Second.
Move Rhodes, second Morrow. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under unfinished business, item 1181, this is the fiscal year 12 budget amendments. This would be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the December 15th, 2011 memos regarding First Amendment fiscal year 12 fire special assessment budget, First Amendment fiscal year 12 refuse budget, First Amendment fiscal year 12 SBA municipal building budget, and First Amendment fiscal year 12 cemetery fund budget. First Amendment fiscal year 12 recreation bond budget, and First Amendment fiscal year 12 recreation complex budget, the First Amendment fiscal year 12 sewer budget, and the First Amendment fiscal year 12 water budget, First Amendment fiscal year 12 major streets budget, First Amendment fiscal year 12 labor local streets budget, and First Amendment fiscal year 12 municipal streets budget, and the December 16, 2011 memo regarding First Amendment fiscal year 12 general fund budget, and to approve and adopt or not adopt the First Amendment fiscal year 12 budgets as submitted.
Move to approve and adopt.
Support.
Move Gearboss, second Rhodes. To approve and adopt. We have discussion. Mr. Rhodes.
And just one question on the refuse fund. There's a line item under expenses for insurance of $3,400. I was wondering why it is that we're paying insurance for refuse when we have a contract. seem, typically in my experience, the firm that we contract with provides insurance to the city as opposed to us paying something.
Right. We don't insure them. We have insurance on our operations. So I'd have to look in the refuse fund to see how much insurance we paid last year and for what functions.
Okay, well, that might be something to consider when these come up next time for review.
Yeah, we do not insure them, and I will get you the answer on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Gearbox.
Just a couple questions. One, could you explain a little bit more on the Wildwood sewer repairs?
Yes, there's a storm drain that is in, actually Jeff is here, and he could probably explain it better, but even when George was here, there was a storm drain that was subject to collapse and had narrowed from its original time, had seepage into it, and it was looked at, and the best way to fix it was thought to put a liner in it so that it would be slightly smaller but whole again, that it would drain properly. Jeff is here. I'm not the drain guy.
Is this an older line, or is it one of the ones that was put in when the Wildwood was actually built?
Put in, I think.
Yeah, it's from the original construction of Wildwood. And we had a section that collapsed 3 or 4 years ago, and we repaired that in cooperation with the original contractor and the pipe material supplier. And now another smaller, shallower section has collapsed also. So we've videoed it, and Gary is primarily putting together a proposal to install a liner in that section, and hopefully we'll all be stable after that.
Do we anticipate any more collapsing or failures like that because of the way it was constructed?
I haven't fully reviewed all the installations. I'm sure the majority, I can't even really say that. There's a mix of 2 different storm sewer materials in that subdivision, and it appears that in a couple spots where the HDPE pipe was installed relatively deep, that seems to be where we're having a problem. I think these are the only 2 spots where it's this deep, but we would need to review the whole site plan and see what other the other locations where this pipe is.
Yeah, I'm just curious if this is the end of the request, or if we're going to end up having more, because I know, what is it, 50? If it's even 15 years old, I'm concerned that what should we have expected for a lifespan on that?
Yeah. It was, now that's a very good material for the correct applications. It was a fairly new material at the time Wildwood was put in, and so there may, I think perhaps some of the contractors weren't, well, nobody really knew how to use it because it hadn't had a lot of life in the field at that point.
Okay. So we may end up having more of a cost. All right. The other question I had for the septic receiving construction, is this going to be recovered through fees charged to septic haulage?
We have an excess of fees from septic haulers, so we use that to support other operations in the treatment facility. So I would say it would be more than made up because we have an excess of fees.
Okay. And then the last question was, I noticed you said something about changing the fines and traffic enforcement related to the increase in the speed limits on Michigan Avenue. I was kind of hoping that we would continue to have enforcement, which was recommended by the Michigan State, which was more in terms of intersections and that type of reinforcement. So I didn't know if we were going to have a trade-off. I would think that we're going to have other enforcements and other means, not maybe speed limits, but we may have people that are running. So I would like to make sure that we're still contributing our same efforts towards some type of policing activity. And
yeah, that does not refer to any command activity. That was just my interpretation, that if people are driving at what the speeds are now, if the speed limit is changed to the level at which people are driving, you probably will have fewer speeding fines. That was my interpretation.
Right, and I see that.
That has nothing to do with
Actual
how
enforcement.
the police are organized or what they're doing. I just interpreted that we may not have as many fines.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there other discussion on this motion? Mr. Morrow?
Mr. Burgoyne, real quick. I am looking at, oh mercy, I'm inundated with paper here. Your memo, it's probably halfway through the packet. I'm looking at page 6, and it's item 101-171-882000, rec membership/holiday party. And I'm wondering if you can just very quickly give me some clarification on that, because on the surface, it seems odd to me that those two items would be lumped together.
Those two items are lumped together. A couple of things happened. The rec membership fees went up by 10%, and more employees made themselves available of the membership. So we had an original budget of $12,000 in that line, and we have exceeded $12,000 even before the holiday party. And the holiday party was planned to be about $800 to $850. So we were already close to $13,000 from the membership side of it.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne.
Is there further discussion on the motion, on the budget? All in favor say aye to approve and adopt.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 1195, this is a 2011 street project balancing change order and final payment. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the December 14th, 2011 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel to approve or not approve the balancing change order and final payment of $173,848.92 to Deponio Contracting Incorporated for completion of the 2011 street and water main projects.
Move to approve.
Second.
Move Morrow, second Gearbat to approve. Discussion. Mr. Rubel? Is there any questions for Mr. Rubel? You want to talk a little bit about?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The project was completed within the time frame we had estimated, and as you can see, it was completed at $51,000 under the contract amount, 4.1% decrease. So we reached our goals of getting it completed and getting it done under the contract amount. And I did give a special recognition to George Danafel here, who agreed in spring to take care of the field inspection, about 80% of it. And so he and I together worked on it. I did mostly the administrative paperwork and all the recording, the pay items, and the reconciliation at the end. But without George, it would have been probably a very difficult project. And he did an exceptional job out there. It was his first time at inspection, but of course he knew the routine for many years of working with me on the design end of those projects, and also working with contractors in the field when there were emergencies out there. So a lot of thanks to George. He did a great job.
Great. So there are Ms. Tahar?
Yes, thank you. I noticed also the deletion of the cost of the pavement markings, and that your memo states that will come back in the spring. So does that, I'm assuming that means we'll also see that amount come back as an expense. Is that correct?
Right. We'll keep that money in reserve. It's not paid out now, of course. It's deducted to keep in reserve. And then when the weather's better, the type of markings we have to be placed when it's at least 60 and dry. And it was in November when we finished paving, and the weather was really wet, cold.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Rubel? Okay, thank you very much. So we have a motion to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under new business, item 11-195, the community event 2012 Winterfest. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 30th, 2011 memo from Art Trap and the application for community event use of public ways for the 2012 Winterfest, to acknowledge receipt of the December 12, 2011 memo from Police Chief Bunton and the December 13, 2011 memos from Public Works Director Fordyce. to approve or not approve the 2012 Winterfest event and 5K run to be held on January 28, 2012, as applied for, including the closure of parking lot number 1 and use of public streets for the 5K run, subject to the following conditions. 1, that the Fifth Corner provide a certificate of insurance with the city as an endorsed additional insured party for the 5K race. 2, that the traffic engineer issue the necessary traffic control orders for any street closures. 3, that volunteers be utilized for the setup and removal of barricades to reduce city costs. That all city costs over and above normal cost estimated in the amount of $780 be waived.
Move to
Do we have a
approve.
motion? Sorry, who moved it?
Move to approve.
Mr. Rhodes moved it. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Roth. To approve. Discussion. Mr. Campbell, are you Mr. Trapp tonight?
I am Mr. Trapp, thank you.
Thank you.
He gave me some notes, so I'll do my best. Saline Winterfest is scheduled for January 28th, 2012, which is a Saturday. Kicks off at 9 a.m. With opening ceremony will include remarks from the mayor and other folks. Also working on having the ice carving instead of at one location like it was last year, that they'd have it at 5 locations. Those currently are being proposed are Benny's, KeyBank, Hartman Insurance, Chamber Office, and Comerica. And they're also seeking sponsorships for those locations for the cost of the ice blocks. And of course, so you wonder what are they going to be carving? Snowmen, of course, since we'll be defending our title. Of course, again, the second annual Winterfest has a partnership with Fifth Corner for their 5K race, sponsored by and responsibility of the Fifth Corner, using the same route as last year, working with the police department. They'll have kids games at the chamber office. Henny Field will host a dog sled demonstration, ice skating demonstration, obviously provided the weather cooperates with us, and the Snowman Building Championship of the Free World, where we will hopefully defend our title. So hopefully we have snow, because if we don't have snow, we're out of luck. We did pick up a couple other communities that will be competing against us this year. Zeeland, St. Clair, as we were last year, but also Three Rivers and the city of Douglas. And also, Mr. Trapp they'd like to have a snowman decorating contest after the building contest. So you go out and decorate some of these snowmen, and then they would have some sort of a prize at that point. Reference food, the downtown diner will be serving breakfast at 8 a.m. on Saturday, and at Henny Field, Saline Firemen will be serving chili for $2 a cup and hot chocolate for $1 a cup. That starts at 11:30 in the morning for the afternoon competitions. And as far as street closings, the only street closings will be those streets involved in the 5K, and as soon as the last runner goes by, they will open that street back up. So again, as we all know, it's very weather dependent. So if it's so the crowd will react to the temperature, the wind, and the amount of snow on the ground. So hopefully we're hoping that we have some snow to use. So those are the details that he's left.
Are there any questions for Mr. Campbell? Thank you for the information. We have a motion on the floor to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 11-196, request to purchase MERS credit service, Jacqueline Lindemore. So motion to acknowledge receipt of the December 14, 2011 memo from City Manager Campbell and the December 7, 2011 memo from Jacqueline Lindemore to approve or not approve the request of Jacqueline Lindemore to purchase additional credit service as outlined in her application for additional credit service with a calculation date of 12/1/2011 at a cost to the employee of $70,545, and that the City Council has read, understands, and approves or not approves the governing body resolution at the bottom of Ms. Lindemore's application for additional credited service.
Move to approve and approve.
Move Morrow to approve and approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second to her. Discussion? If there's no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 11-197, reporting of EVIP information to Department of Treasury. This would be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the December 13, 2011 memo from Finance Director Burgoyne to approve or not approve the 12/19/11 plan to cooperate, collaborate, and consolidate services with certification to be sent to the Michigan Department of Treasury by the January 1, 2012 deadline. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Move to Harr.
Second.
Second, Gearba, to approve. Mr. Burgoyne, you want to talk about that report?
The Economic Vitality Incentive Program has 3 hoops to it during the year. This is the second one. We had to show what our collaboration or consolidation efforts have been to date, and propose at least one to look into to attempt to collaborate or consolidate. So this, the one which we think we will achieve is assisting the state police by providing them the use of part of our facility for 5 state police officers. We know that that's being implemented, so we hope that to achieve that pretty easily. That does have an overhead savings that the state police do not have to have as many locations. We listed a few others to look into.
So will we charge a portion of our overhead back to the state?
That would be nice. No, this is just estimating that we are operating more efficiently, and we estimated all of the dollars.
Okay, well, maybe that's another discussion.
Yes, currently the agreement is that, because the only overhead that we would have would be electricity and water. I mean, everything else, I mean, the computer and everything is all state, and all their paper they use is state, so very small overhead. And so currently, in exchange for them being here and being another police presence in and around our community and whatever during investigations that they can help as well, that's been the trade-off thus far.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Rhodes?
I had one question that relates to the same subject matter. So the process of estimating savings allows us to take credit for another organization's savings? Because the $75K that's here is a savings to the state police, not to us.
Correct. But
Do that?
I put that in there because I don't think the state police are reporting this way. That's
Okay, well, it seems like it would be more accurate if we put that statement in there that that's estimated savings to the state police rather than to us. That sort of skews things. And then my only other question under Public Works, is offering sweeping services, Saline area school parking lots, and it says the school's current practice is unknown. So I don't understand how we can estimate a savings if we don't know what they're doing now. And whose savings is it, ours or the schools? I'm confused.
Well, it's all new territory,
Yeah.
These requirements. And as you know, we were looking for areas to report. Basically, these, at this point in the game, my understanding was these are items that we're going to look into. Here's a potential opportunity for collaborative savings, and our plan is to investigate these items and see what we can do. So there's 2 parts to that report. There's things that we're already doing that we've estimated cost savings, and then there's things we're going to look into to see if we can create a cost savings there. So the parking lot sweeping is one of those things to be investigated.
Okay, I guess it's the statement of the school's current practice is unknown that bothers me. If we were just going to investigate offering sweeping services, that'd be okay.
Well, it's just a proposed, so it's not really, that's why.
Right.
we'll change, we'll adopt the wording on both of those then.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Is there other comments on this? Mr. Gearba?
I would just like to agree with Mr. Rhodes on that comment about the $75,000, but I would also like to see some kind of wording in there that said benefits the surrounding townships, because really, it's the ones that don't have any police service that currently that are using the Michigan State Patrol that are going to benefit more by having them here local than necessarily being outside. So I think we need to really communicate that we're benefiting the larger area so that they really do see the savings is more to them than to us. and other individuals.
Any further discussion on this motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 11-198, the CMAQ grant application for funding street sweeper purchase. This is a motion to acknowledge the December 16, 2011 memo from Public Works Director Fordyce to authorize or not authorize staff to apply for grant funding from, where is it? I think it, if I remember, I think it's from does it come from the feds through MDOT? Is that correct?
Yes.
So, through MDOT. So, grant funding from MDOT in the amount of $202,000, no, $40,000, we should have done this before, $520. Right? Is that correct? Oh, that's our match.
Yeah, the grant amount requested,
202.
proposed is 202,600 with a match of 40,520.
Right, sorry. Reversed it. And is it from MDOT or from, it's a federal grant, but it flows through MDOT?
Correct.
It's the okay. So did everybody get that motion? Do I need to reread it? My apologies.
I'll move to authorize.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Gearba. Discussion? Mr. Rhodes?
I'd just like to recommend that in the cover letter or cover email as it is, that when we submit this grant request, that we strongly recommend it be included in the 2013 phase as opposed to the 2014, since Ms. Mickey is no longer going to be around to baby that street sweeper. I don't think ours is going to last till 2014.
It's an open question.
Mr. Har?
Yeah, yes, thank you. I have a question about whether any consideration was given to either an alternative fuel or hybrid street sweeping equipment. I believe some are available now. I don't know about cost.
Yeah, actually this very same model is available in a natural gas version. And I very cursorily looked at that. It's a $60,000 upcharge for the natural gas, and we don't have a convenient natural gas fueling station. So, you know, there's one not terribly far away, but this vehicle has a top speed of 18 miles an hour and a more realistic real-world speed of 10 miles per hour. So to travel to the closest fueling station, it would end up being about a 3-hour round trip. At least for now, based on the infrastructure we have available, kind of dismissing natural gas. Also looked into propane. Similar, roughly $60,000 upcharge, and then installing our own propane fueling station is somewhat manageable, about $10,000–15,000. The challenge I came up against with that one is that the manufacturer hasn't done many of them in propane and doesn't have, at the moment, don't have the emissions figures that I need to apply for the grant. And with the timeline being so tight, I'm not sure I can get those. I might be able to get that data in time for the grant application, and it would almost certainly have a higher cost-benefit ratio, since this is an air quality grant. The propane vehicles typically have about half the emissions of a diesel-powered one. So it may be favorable, but I don't have the data, and I'm not sure I'm going to have it by the 30th.
Okay.
So.
So I'm not a street sweeping equipment expert, but I did find a reference to an electric hybrid vehicle. Do you know anything about that? And the claims from the manufacturer, which
Right.
I'm not in a position to evaluate, are that it's high performance and 40% fuel efficient savings.
Yeah. There is, I'm aware of one, and I was trying to find a piece of information here. I don't have any cost information on that, but I'm assuming it's got to be pretty significant based on some of the other features that that unit has. And the 40% cost saving, I'm trying to find the, here we go. In 2010, our sweeper traveled 1,500 miles.
Okay.
So,
Would it help with the points, though, for the application?
I don't know. I mean, it might, if it depends on, it's based on emissions, so it's possible that that one might have. But the other reason that I disregarded that one is it's manufactured by a foreign company, and the company's been through a couple bankruptcies, so I was a little leery of that. So, you know, the unit that I'm proposing here is the 15-year younger version of the one that we already have, with a couple of different upgrades. And that's been a very good, strong, reliable unit, and takes care of our needs very well. So I was proposing sticking with the same basic sweeper.
Okay. Yeah, I just appreciate the fact that you took the time to look into alternatives, and I hope that as we go down the road and replace more equipment, this will be a factor in considering future equipment.
Absolutely.
Is there any other discussion on this motion? If not, we have a motion to authorize. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Fordyce. Item 11, 199, appointment of interim police chief. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the December 14, 2011 memo from City Manager Campbell to approve or not approve the appointment of Mike Lindman to serve as interim police chief beginning January 3, 2012 and ending 2 weeks after the permanent police chief begins their employment with the City of Saline at an annual salary of $80,289, which would be prorated based on the time worked, and that the mayor, clerk, and city manager be authorized or not authorized to execute an employment contract with Mr. Lindman after review and approval by the city attorney. Let's start with a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo.
So moved.
Break it up. Mr. Gearba, move that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Morrow. Okay. Mr. Campbell, would you like to go over your memo, and then I think there's some questions council members will have.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Mr. Lindman is actually here in the front row, so he'll be available for some questions if council would like to do so. Just a little bit of review. Mayor Driscoll and I did interview 3 candidates a couple Fridays ago, and unanimously came up with Mr. Lindman. Mike is retired deputy chief from the Garden City Police Department in May of 2006, after a 26-year career with the Garden City Department. Started as a road patrol, and then became a crime prevention officer, then became a detective sergeant, then became a road lieutenant, road patrol lieutenant, and then investigative services lieutenant. And then the last few years of his career, he served as deputy chief. And I can tell you from the extensive background check that we did, he did his job very well respected, and I think he will serve as interim very well. However, just to give you some more information, he also, as far as his background or his education, he has an associate's degree from Schoolcraft College, a bachelor's degree from Wayne State, and a master's degree from the University of Detroit. He has been retired, as I mentioned, in 06, so about 5.5 years. He he no longer has his MCOLS certification, which is the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards. They're the ones that certify police officers. However, to be a police chief, you do not need to be certified. It's similar to another exception to that is sheriff. But been working with the MCOLS director very closely on this, and while he would not be able to identify himself as a police officer as far as enforcing the law, would not be able to carry a gun. And that's okay, because what we need this interim police chief is to head up the department and to provide leadership, to hold on to that rudder. And we've talked with, or I've talked with the department, and we've talked about some of those things. And regardless of who's in that spot, they're going to be leaning on the sergeants and the road patrol folks, and everybody across the board. But I want someone for them to be able to lean on, that's a leader that knows how to deal with things, that's dealt with these things, and can give good direction and good advice as well. And so I think I truly believe that Mike is the right person to do that, and will do a great job. Trying to think. As far as some details, he would be assigned a fleet vehicle while he's working, but it will not be would not be taking it home. He would be wearing civilian clothes, civilian attire, for a couple reasons. One, there's if you were required to wear a uniform, there'd be an investment there that you may or may not be able to recoup, again, because he's going to be here for a short period of time, relatively speaking. And then also the point of identifying himself as a police officer. So there are other communities. The one that comes to mind that in the past have had civilian police chiefs is Dearborn. They had a civilian there for about 10 or 15 years as a chief. He was actually an attorney, but was never certified. And that is certainly, it is more common to have a certified police chief, and certainly for the permanent position, absolutely. I would certainly be an advocate for that. One of the requirements would be that they would be a certified, MCOL certified law enforcement officer. But for this position as interim, I don't believe that this should be a hindrance or a blockade to appointing Mr. Lindeman as the interim police chief.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. We have questions? Mr. Peters.
Quick question. First, Mr. Lindeman, thanks for coming in tonight. You certainly have a strong resume. But I do have one concern, and that's with the certification. And my concern is not so much you yourself, but we're going to be losing our chief pretty soon, and we've lost our second in command, so we're down 2 officers. That's like 17% of our force. And I think it's probably, would be better if we had a new fellow coming in, had a certification. If we run into sick time or vacations, it may put us in a bind. I believe that takes us down to, will it be 12 officers then? That we have, or 10. We'll be down to 10 officers from 12 to 10. So I just think that's a little lean for the city.
I think Mr. Campbell can speak to
Yeah,
that.
that would not be for Mike. We also have 3 and soon to be 4 part-time officers that we currently already rely on to put in a significant amount of hours so we can maintain our minimum 2-officer 24/7 coverage. Feel, again, very strong. Let me back up. I mean, our current chief, he doesn't go, I mean, he does not go out on routine patrols, and he does, I mean, he's there if absolutely positively necessary, but that is certainly not his main charge to back folks up. But he certainly has, and he's, you know, but again, you know, we've talked with, you know, Mike understands that if he gets a call in the middle of the night and they've got something going, he's on his way in. So
I would just point out also that if there was a crisis in the community, there's mutual aid.
Right.
So we can rely on public safety folks from around the region, and that occurs on a regular basis with other communities if they have a crisis and they need backup. So we would just be calling on, I mean, you might want to talk
sure.
about that a little bit.
Right, but also, for instance, I'll use an exaggerated example. Hopefully this doesn't happen anytime soon, but we'll just say, for instance, we had a barricaded gunman incident here in Saline. Mike or whomever, as the interim police chief, if they're not certified, they're still gonna be given direction. They're not gonna be able to take a shot or be the actual official arresting officer. But other than that, they're in the heat of the battle.
I understand. I think it's just a numbers game, percentage workforce, and being able to cover for unforeseen problems like, illnesses and vacations and things like that.
Right, and I would agree, if we were talking about a road patrol officer, I would agree, but this is the chief, and the chief is not used in that fashion currently, and I don't foresee that the chief operating in that capacity in the future either.
Are there other, Mr. Roth?
I was wondering what it would take to be recertified, what it would cost, what it involves, and if it's worth the while for you to pursue that.
I did check into that. There's 2 locations in the state of Michigan that recertify officers. The very first opportunity that I would have to do that would be, I believe it was January 19th. That's a 2-day process, and that would be at Macomb Community College, I believe. The second way, or the second opportunity would be in February, and that's a 60-hour course. I've been out of law enforcement for 5.5 years. I would prefer to go to the 60-hour refresher course, and that would be in February. When this opportunity started, they were starting a class at Macomb Community College on December 10th, and there was no opportunity at that time to become involved and get enrolled in that. I have to apply to MCOLS and get the ball rolling from there to go back and get recertified. But it is possible, and the earliest date would be January. I'd be more comfortable with the February date.
Who would bear the cost? Would it be the individual or the hiring people?
I didn't look into the cost. I don't even know what it would be. That would be something that I'd have to contact Macomb Community College on. At the time when this opportunity came up, we actually kind of discounted that possibility. So I didn't look into the cost. I didn't look into it any further. But that would be an easy answer to obtain.
Thank you.
Mr. Campbell?
I believe my understanding is about $1,500, and as far as who would pay for it, to me, I would see that as potentially rolling that into, into the contract, if council, felt so strongly that they wanted a certified interim chief. But it's in that $1,500 ballpark.
And also the issue there is just the uniform and the gun, right? Isn't that, is there more for the requirement to be certified? Basically the operational piece would be all the same except for that.
Correct. Right. As far as he would have to be certified, firearm certification as well.
But I guess to your point is then we would have to buy a uniform and.
Well, he wouldn't necessarily have to wear a uniform just because he was certified.
Okay. So it's just, that would just allow to carry a gun.
Right. And he would also have arrest powers.
Great. Is there further discussion? Okay.
I have just a out-of-the-box question. When someone's deputized, do they have a power to arrest? And if that's an avenue that you could be a deputy, you deputize like the sheriff would deputize a private citizen or someone else.
I think you need to have training. You need to be.
I don't have the answer to that, but I believe that the federal government requires the certification. Now, I've already been through the training, so whether that's an option or not, I really don't know. I do have the minimum amount of training through the police academy, but I would think that MCOLS would still require the certification, but I don't have the answer for sure.
I would just say, thinking out of the box, it's a possibility.
Yeah, I would suggest that it would probably be required for him to be certified and have arrest powers would be through MCOLS, especially being the interim chief.
So are there any other further questions of Mr. Campbell or Mr. Linden? Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This will be a motion to approve or not approve the appointment of Mike Lindman to serve as interim police chief beginning January 3rd, 2012, and ending 2 weeks after the permanent police chief begins their employment with the City of Saline, an annual salary of $80,289 prorated based on the time worked. that the mayor, clerk, and city manager be authorized or not authorized to execute an employment contract with Mr. Limon after review and approval by the city attorney. Do we have a motion?
I so move.
To approve or not?
To approve and authorize.
Move Roth to approve and authorize. Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Gearbox.
I think this is a good alternative for us because basically it's going to be an interim position anyways, and under the confidence in looking at the resume and everything in the background checks, I think this individual is a good choice for this period. I don't have an issue if we need to pay for recertification in February, if that needs to occur, if people would feel more comfortable with that. So I think that's a fee that normally anybody would pay. And in this type of situation, because it's such a short-term type of thing, if we really want to feel that more confident, that we would allow that to go ahead and happen. But I'm fine with the way it is right now.
Is there further discussion on the motion? Mr. Morrow.
Thank you, Mayor. I would echo the sentiments of my colleague, Mr. Gearbaugh, and say that I support this motion, and based on a few conversations I've had, it's apparent that the gentleman we will be hiring this evening has a sterling reputation, and I think he'll do an outstanding job leading the department for this interim period. I would also add that I, at this point, am not in favor of paying for any recertification. It's not as if this gentleman is a novice. He has over 30 years of professional experience in law enforcement, and conversely, what the training and education that he would receive and the certification that he would get, I can't imagine an incident in the next 6 to 8 months in which he would need to utilize a firearm or have to make an arrest. That's just not the function, that's not the role of the police chief. So that's my sentiment, but again, I support the motion and look forward to working with you in your capacity as police chief. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? All in favor to approve and authorize, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No, and just to clarify, I think you're perfectly qualified to be the police chief. I just would prefer we had a certified officer in that seat.
Okay, motion carries. Under discussion, commission committee reports. Do you have any, Mr. Morrow?
And maybe you want to echo some of these sentiments, Mayor, but the Planning Commission met last Wednesday, and the one action item that we had on our agenda was extending the site plan approval for the Banks of Saline. That is the development on Monroe Street, the former Universal Die-Cast site. And the owner, the deed holder, indicated to us that they are still in litigation, but he's cautiously optimistic that things will improve, and still committed to redeveloping the site once the cleanup occurs. So.
Yep, they're still trying to work with Johnson Controls to have for them to implement their plan. They filed a lawsuit the last fall, and I think it's being heard in March now. They actually did get finally the judge set a date and everything, which they hadn't up till now. They've just been doing, what's it called, information piece. Anyhow, I don't know, Mr. Campbell, if you have anything you want to add, but it is being addressed. It's because JCI is not being responsive, so. Do you have anything you want to add?
Well, just very briefly, I think it's been better than a year, I believe, since they started litigation. And just as the mayor said, Banks of Saline folks, Saline River Properties, they have cleanup responsibilities, but before that, Johnson Controls has some pretty extensive cleanup requirements handed down by the EPA that since about 2003 or 4, I believe, and they have done a little bit, but there's the big controversy is the EPA's requirements are to be cleaned up to residential standards, and Johnson Controls claims that it should only have to be to industrial standards. And so that's kind of where the rub has been, and it's been going back and forth. They would submit a cleanup plan, and I apologize for the exact terminology that the EPA uses, but they would send it back and say, no, you need to do some more work on it, and they would take some more time, and they'd submit it, and they say, no, you'd have, and so it goes back and forth until present day, and so they still have some work to do. So hopefully, again, hopefully we'll see a positive outcome and that the site will get cleaned up for numerous reasons, and one certainly for the benefit of the community as well as the property owner and for future development of the site.
I should also add that I believe the site plan extension was approved unanimously for another year.
I have a question where it's cleanup. It's talking about contamination, but I see sightly mess. There's all the concrete and stuff like that. How was this litigation preventing them from cleaning up the sightly mess?
I don't believe that they are going to move any more concrete or anything until they get a response from JCI, because they were digging and uncovered some things that had not been identified. So they've been trying to work with JCI. JCI's, I'm talking about Saline River Properties, and JCI has not been responsive, so they've done what the federal government allows, something called a citizens suit, filing on behalf of this citizenry. And so this actually happened a year ago, and they did approach the city about whether or not we wanted to join them in the suit, and we chose to let them move forward with it. So they've been doing their fact-finding, I guess is what it's called. And they actually did try to settle and get Johnson Controls to come to the table, but so far it hasn't happened. So at any rate, are there other committee reports? Ms. Tahar?
Yes, I have two, thank you. First, the Arts and Culture Committee met on Tuesday, December 12th. For part of the meeting, guest Tamara Real led a discussion with the committee about alliances and partnerships the committee could use to further the committee's work and help it define its role in facilitating arts within the community. Committee also went on to review goals and strategies that had originally been set in 2009, some of which were set aside a bit in the past year or more of work on the Seats of Our Heritage project. And the committee concluded that some of those merit returning to at this point. So the goals and strategy discussion will continue at our January meeting. Our goals for the committee's goals for the coming year will certainly include work with the Bixby collection and continuing attention to the proposed sculpture walk project. And also thanks to City Manager Campbell for bringing a possible grant opportunity to the committee's attention. There are a couple of committee members who are investigating that further right now. Secondly, the Local Access Cable Television Commission met on Wednesday, December 13th. Station Manager Chase Stanton reported on new programming that he has initiated since the Commission's September meeting, including some public services announcements and programs, public events, and some school events. And Mr. Stanton has initiated a new interview series called Saline Speaks, in which he's been interviewing 2 or 3 city department heads each month. And if council agrees to do so, he would like to expand this series to include interviewing of council members as part of that. And eventually he might also move on to include interviewing of Saline school officials. Mr. Stanton and Commission Chair Brian Puffer reported that both the station and community education have been receiving positive comments in the last several months, and Mr. Stanton is continuing working on ways to improve the station. And he also noted that CTN programming is available not only via cable television, but also through Vimeo, the internet streaming service. Thank you.
Any other commission reports? Mr. Rhodes?
Not exactly a commission report, because Environmental Commission meets 2 days from now, but a question, and for Mr. Burgoyne to believe, when are the commission budget requests due to be turned in?
Towards the end of January.
Okay, prior to this January 20th date, I'm assuming?
Is that the date?
That's the date that says requested budgets due to Finance Department?
Correct, and the budget requests will go out tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commission reports?
Just one more.
Mr.
Just
Peters.
wanted to say a quick thank you to Pamela Grosans, who is the treasurer for the Celtic Festival. She managed to land a $3,000 Arts Alliance grant for this year's 2012 Celtic Festival, and that will certainly go a long way to make a successful year for us. So, Pam, well done.
Any other commission reports? Not, we have any reports and any other announcements? Okay, the water connection metering. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would invite Chief F. to come to the podium, please, since he's the one that started all this. So when you said in writing, I have an email, but so nothing official, but I will turn over to Chief F. here in a second, but received a request this morning reference changing of water meters in the fire department, and there is a cost for a connection fee, and so he'll speak to the request to waive that fee. So I will turn it over to Chief Eft.
Okay. First of all, I apologize for adding to the agenda. It was actually Mr. Campbell's idea. So what we've done next door is we've taken on a plumbing project that we've needed some repairs. We have a leak in our hydrant system. We have a hydrant inside the building that we fill the trucks to keep them full of water for fire protection. Well, that system was put in 1967 when they built the building, and I'm sure that it worked well at that time. But since then, you know, they've added, we now have a meter, we now have backflow prevention, so now it's really reduced how much water flows and the length of time that it takes to fill a truck. Well, because we're making the repairs, now's the time to upgrade the system and be better prepared for, you know, down the road. Well, I had been dealing with the other Mr. Grossman at the DPW, Eric, and we had talked about the fees to increase from a 2-inch meter to a 3-inch meter, and it was like $600 and some, which seemed fair, and so we kind of got the ball rolling and we got the project started. And when I went to order the meter from Eric, he said, well, let me just make sure I got my numbers right. And I believe he came over and talked to Mr. Roble, and they kind of surprised us with there's a connection permit fee of $9,400. Well, we weren't quite prepared for that. So I think that, to be clear, I think why they have the fee is when you increase your meter size, there could be concerns that you're going to use more water. In our case, we're not doing it for volume, we're doing it for speed. We want to be able to back the truck in, fill it as quickly as possible, and move on. So I think maybe when the ordinance was created, maybe they didn't take into consideration city services, you know, fire department, police department, DPW. I'm not really sure, but it certainly is something that we're not ready to be able to do. I could certainly put it back the way it was, and again, we would be inadequate, I think. So I guess I'm looking for a waive of that fee if it's possible.
Okay, and Mr. Grossman, our city attorney, has a comment.
Yeah, we've had only a little time to work on this. I received a call from city manager this morning, but I did get a chance to look at it, and section 94-3, entitled Connection Permit Charges, reads as follows: in order to assure sufficient revenues to pay for improvements, enlargements, extensions, and repairs from time to time to the water supply system and sewage disposal system of the city, in addition to the actual cost of labor and materials for each connection to the water supply system or sewage disposal system of the city, a connection permit charge shall be levied against every property newly connected to the system to provide the property's fair share of the cost of additions to the systems resulting from service demand growth or from additional connections to the system, and to bear its fair share of the amortized cost of the existing improvements not financed by special assessment. the connection permit charge shall become payable at the time of occupancy at the rates set forth in this section. Now, you tell me that the system became operable in 1967, I believe?
Correct.
If that's the case, that's when the connection permit charge would have been levied and paid. Now, I have not had time to check whether or not it was paid, but I think it's kind of irrelevant at this point. I'm sure back in 1967, at the time the premises were hooked up to the system, that's the time it was billed and would have been paid. So in my opinion, we're long past the time where a connection permit fee is required. Now, this connection permit fee is not the cost of labor and materials for building or changing the meter. It's simply a charge to cover the things I read here. So in my opinion, it's too late to levy any connection permit charge now, after all these years, and there is none required.
They've already paid a connection.
And also keep in mind that this is not an outlay. We're not talking about the city paying money to the fire department, nor are we talking about the fire department paying money to the city. We're talking not about an outlay by anybody. We're talking about a failure to pay, a non-payment. In other words, not a payment, a non-payment.
Okay.
Ordinarily, we would be asking the person hooking up newly connected to the system pay, in addition to the cost of labor and material to build the sewer, they would be called upon to pay for a connection fee. But that would have been done in 1967.
Mr. Rhodes.
I would disagree somewhat with the Honorable Mr. Grossman there. I think that interpretation would be a very dangerous thing to bring forward, because it would mean that any of the existing businesses that needed to expand and put in a larger meter would not pay any additional fees. I think we would be better off, if we're going to do this, of just saying because it's another city function, city-related function, that we would waive that connection fee. But I think we need to maintain the ability to charge for every time a connection is enlarged.
Mr. Rubel, you have a comment?
Yes. Yeah, we recognize that they did pay, or we recognize that there was a prior connection, and for a price of a 2-inch meter. But later in that same section of the code Mr. Grossman read, we're just dealing with the difference between the 2-inch and the 3-inch size, because it says in the code, and rightfully so, that when someone increases from a 3-inch to a 4-inch, they don't pay for a connection charge for the 4-inch. They just pay the difference between the 2 meters.
Is this $9,000 the difference?
Correct.
That's the difference
Right,
between a
because of
2-inch
the
and a
volume
3-inch?
between a 2-inch. Right. Actually, the volume that can travel through a 3-inch meter is more than double a 2-inch meter, because it's the, it's circular, it's the radius, pi r squared. And so that's the way it was set up through water and sewer studies that Mr. Burgoyne worked out with Tetra Tech. And so we are only looking, the code only requires the difference in cost, not that he pay a full connection charge.
So the $8,000 is the difference?
Correct. And, we realize that it's worthy of a waiver, because it isn't covered as an exception in the code. The code's general, and it mainly applies to, corporations, businesses, and for-profit, not fire protection and for public safety.
Mr. Campbell, do you have a recommendation?
I know Mr. Burgoyne had a comment first before.
Right. Tetra Tech's study took the cost of the water system based on usage. Now, the fire chief said the usage is not going to change. Now, in the general case, when somebody changes from a 2-inch to a 3-inch, it's because they have twice as much volume and they have twice as much need. What I would suggest is that you follow the Tetra Tech pricing study, which is based on volume of use, and if you can determine that they're really not going to use a different volume, they just want to operate in a safer manner, that this is a total exception. It's not going to cause the water system to have to be built bigger because they're using more. The size of the meter relates to how much people use, generally speaking, in 99 out of 100% cases. This is the one exception that you clearly know. I would do it on that basis. That would follow volume of use pricing, and this is just an exception. And in every other case, you would continue to follow volume of use pricing for your meters.
May I add something? We certainly, to fill a fire truck, could use a hydrant from in town anywhere that's not metered, that doesn't take any of this into consideration. This is just a nicety. It's there. It's convenient. We don't have to call the DPW to drain the hydrant after we use it. It's always been a plus, and we don't have a problem paying for the increase in the meter. I mean, that seems fair. That's the equipment. It's just that, the connection fee is a little heavy for something that we're using the water for fire protection. So.
Mr. Campbell, do you have any further comments?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Certainly what I agree with what Mr. Burgoyne said. However, I don't believe the exception should be based on quantity or lack thereof as far as increase. It needs to be based on any exception, if the council were to do that, we based on, as the chief mentioned, on public safety, the city service, governmental entity exemption, as opposed to, some other, because somebody else could come in, a private, for profit, and say, well, I just want to get it done faster, but I'm not going to use any more. And I think we're going to, we could potentially hurt or paint ourselves into a corner, which I don't think we want to do. But I would say, I can see both sides of the argument, but I would also, we're supposed to be good stewards of tax dollars, and in this case, user fees, because it's an enterprise fund, and it's not supported by tax dollars, but by user fees, and we're supposed to be good stewards. But in all actuality, or all practicality, I should say, we would end up paying for it if we did charge them. We would end up paying for it out of our general fund, because that's where fire comes from, is general fund. And it would be our portion based on the formula, but we'd still be paying for it. As I believe also, as Mr. Grossman alluded to, we're not losing anything. We're just not accepting bringing something in. So it's not like we're giving something away, or giving money away, if you will. Like I said, I can see both sides, one status quo and pay it, but I would say certainly I certainly strongly believe it would be justified to waive that fee for the fire department.
Well, how much is the amount again, Chief F?
No, it's about $9,500.
Yeah,
I need the exact amount. How much?
You want the exact?
Yes, please.
Well, it's actually $9,469.
Thank you. Is there a further discussion from council? Mr. Beerbaugh?
Chief F raised a good point. What if we declare it a fire hydrant, or is it metered and we're recharging for the water that goes through it? That's the problem.
Yep. We're metering it, and we're paying for what goes through it. Correct.
But the $9,000 is for the just.
I know. I'm just saying, he made a good point that we don't charge through our fire hydrants, but why are we charging through this one if it's only used to fill the tanks? So, I'm saying if you declared this a public fire hydrant, you're potentially not having to pay that fee because we're no longer metering it and everything else. Looking for an alternative is what I'm suggesting.
Mr. Grossman, you had further comment?
Yeah, in answer to Mr. Rhodes' observation, I would caution that you examine section 94-4 entitled Meter Sizing, Installation, and Ownership. That has to be paid. Section 94-3 deals with connection permit charge, which is a one-shot deal paid at the time of connection of the property to the system. There's no authority in this code to permit another bite of the apple for the connection permit charge, in my opinion.
Okay, well, further questions? Mr. Roth?
I was wondering if, at this point, since I'm green, if this should be removed from a discussion item to a motion.
Well, I think we need to figure out what the motion is, so that's why we're having a little bit more discussion. But I actually have written a motion. That's why I needed the exact number.
Okay.
Is there further questions for any staff?
No.
Well, in light of the fact that basically we're taking money out of one pocket to put it in another, I personally would recommend and put this motion, let's see what, if between the two heads here,
So we'll find out in a moment. Yeah. Well, we'll probably actually get a motion here.
Okay, so this is a joint effort of the clerk and mine. It's a motion to waive the connection fee in the amount of $9,496 for the Saline Area Fire Department upgrade from the water line from 2 inches to 3 inches for public safety services.
I'll move that motion.
I support.
We have a motion by Morrow, a second by Roth. Discussion. Mr. Gearbox.
Do we just need to, does it need to be any stronger so that we don't have any kind of exception put in it in the future? Because public safety issues, we've done that in buildings where we've made them put in a larger water main for fire protection in some of our developments. I just don't want to have all of a sudden this be used as an example down the road when we build a big building on Michigan Avenue, and then they have them say, well, you know, this is for public safety, so I shouldn't have to pay this fee for this larger main. What I would like, basically, you're saying that we're calling this a dedicated city fire hydrant should be used in that location for filling of the fire trucks due to its location.
You want to have a fire hydrant in your parking lot now?
Well, no, that really is a fire hydrant.
Okay, so.
Per se. Well, where Mr. Gearball is going, I believe, is we have 2 meters. We have metered domestic water coming in that we use for showers, bathrooms, what have you, that certainly we pay for. Now, the metering and the paying for the water that we're putting in the fire trucks for fire protection, I don't know where that started and how it got going. The metering, I understand, Mr. Fordyce explained.
I don't think we want to go there. You know why?
No, I'm just
No,
saying.
I'm fine. I'm just bringing it up as a discussion. But I was saying
I don't know how or why
we
we
share
got
that
to
cost
that
with the rest of the
I know,
fire
but that's the same
district
thing with waiving this fee.
entities. And so this is, you know, a pro rata thing when you actually have a metered fee for the water that goes into your fire, for your water hauling. So
Okay.
that would be shared, not just, it wouldn't just be the city burden, it's shared by all the partners in the fire district. So I don't see, personally, I would not support declaring it a fire hydrant and not metering it, because I think that goes to, then all the water that they use.
Oh, I don't have a problem with metering it. You could leave it metering it, just that we declare it some kind of a public fire hydrant, but the usage of the water, because it's the same type. If we have anybody hook up it to a fire hydrant, we meter that, I believe, when they fill, we've done that in the past, where we've had water trucks come in and we metered them when they took water.
I think they have them metered at the old DPW yard. Don't they have something that you can fill?
We do sell water.
Come up to the mic, please.
We
just
do
really-
have we do have a system in place where we can sell water to contractors. There's a fee in the fee book for that. There's a small setup fee. And that water is metered also. So, but in terms of metering the water that Craig's using to fill the trucks, the state reviews our water distribution system, and one of the measures they use is how much water did you produce and how much did you sell. And you know, then the difference is unmetered water, and you can explain away a certain amount of that from firefighting and things like that, but the rest of it is assumed lost, which once you get to a certain lost figure, then you got to start doing things.
Okay, so it is possible to add to this motion and to recognize this water line as a public hydrant. Is that what you're looking for? Fire hydrant. So the motion would be to waive connection fee in the amount of $9,496 for the Saline Area Fire Department, upgrade of the line from 2 inches to 3 inches for public safety services, and to recognize this line as a public fire hydrant. Does that sound?
I believe that should work.
Does anybody on council have any questions about it?
I'm not sure what we have to gain by that.
What Mr. Gearbott's talking about is protecting us from future liability from somebody that may have to upgrade their line, say it's an apartment building, and they are adding extra units, so they have to expand their connection line, their water line from 3 to 4 inches, and it's a requirement because there's more bodies in the building, and therefore they're going to say it's a public safety issue, and you just waived it for the fire department.
Well, I'm just wondering when, I'm thinking it might be opening another box saying that it's a public fire hydrant no longer needs to be metered.
We're not saying
So-
that, and neither is the chief.
I just say I don't want that interpretation to be made by the others surrounding areas that uses our water.
Recognize this line as a public fire hydrant at the fire department that will continue to be metered.
That clarifies that. And I just don't want to give our surrounding communities an out.
Okay, the clerk's great at conciseness. And recognize this line as a metered public fire hydrant. Okay, does that sound sufficient? Do I read it again?
No.
Good. Are we ready to vote on this?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a support to waive the connection fee. No further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Chief F. We have one other discussion item, the cemetery task force. Mr. Morrow?
Yeah, just real quick, Mayor, thank you. We've had a few proposals that have been submitted to the city administrative offices, including a letter that should be in all of my colleagues' inbox this evening, dated December 19th, from a Saline area resident regarding some of his suggestions for improving Oakwood Cemetery and some of his commentary regarding our cemetery expansion, which was approved earlier this fall. So considering that, I think it would be appropriate to reconvene the Oakwood Cemetery Task Force, which I think was established back in either 2009 or 2010. The dilemma being is that you may recall that cemetery consisted of Clerk Hill, Deputy Clerk Linda Moore, Superintendent Rubel, City Manager Campbell, myself, and former council members Alicia Ping and Pat Ivy. So my request is twofold. One, to identify either 1 or 2 replacements from council to sit on that task force, and hopefully to work with city administrative staff to identify a time to meet, hopefully I would think sometime in the latter part of the month of January.
Okay. Can we bring the task force recommendation to the next council meeting to vote on? Is that sufficient for the rest of council? And then we can establish the meeting at the end of January.
Well, we don't really, you mean an appointment?
Yeah, we need to make an
Okay.
appointment, right?
Okay.
So,
I'm not sure we technically voted on it before, but if that's your pleasure.
well, since we're in the process of making reappointments for the new committees for the new year, I think I would prefer to wait until we
Okay.
have that outlined and more formalized
Okay.
as part of that process.
That's fine.
It will still meet your goal of having a task force in place by the end of January to
Okay.
review recommendations, but we are sort of in a transition phase at the
Sure.
moment. So January will be a little bit different. Okay, so we'll take care of that at the first meeting in January. Got that, please. Is there any other discussion items?
Just real quick.
Mr.
One item, I just want to acknowledge Mr. Fordyce has been working on repairing the streetlights on North Ann Arbor Street because they've been out all the way down for the last week and a half or so. And people are thinking that we haven't been on. All of those have been on? No, it's dark, totally dark on both sides of the street, all the way from Harper to east to Bennett Street. And that's just only been within the last couple weeks.
Well, I noticed this today
And
during
this
the
is dark
day,
very
the
nice.
streets on North Ann Arbor Street from Bennett to the old middle school were all on during the day.
They're working on it.
Also, maybe it's the typing.
Yeah.
They were working on them today.
It was totally weird, because I thought maybe, I hope they're not sensitive to the darkness, because it can be really dark during the day in Michigan. So,
But just to know that that
okay.
they are working on it.
Yeah, that's a good
not be
point.
safety
Thank you
concern.
for, is there any other discussion items? Mr. Rhodes?
I just wanted to acknowledge the imminent retirement of Jan Wagner, who's retiring very quickly here, very soon, after having worked for 20 years as a part-time employee. And I just wanted to publicly thank her for her service.
Okay, great. Yes, I would think all council feels that way. So thank you for bringing that forward. Under public comment, under the Open Meetings Act, Mr. Campbell.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Mayor. On that note, thank you, Mr. Rhodes. There is a retirement luncheon tomorrow from, I believe, 11:30 to 1 or 1:30 to recognize Jan as well as Vicky. So if you're available, please stop by and say hello, and for anybody for that matter.
Okay, under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, 600 Canterbury. The comments made on Wildwood, and are we going to probably have more problems? Yes. That was a wetland, Edwards muck, which was corrosive. And it was stated by Ayers, Lewis, Norris, and May, the infiltration, because the freezing of the soil and the thawing would make the pipes get out of a line. So of course, the disposal plant is taking on all kinds of water that's infiltrating the lines. And Mr. Layer, that was the old Layer farm, there in fact was a lawsuit as far as not putting as much Mayor, I don't know, he was councilman, Mr. Beach, Councilman Beach said there ought to be a sign there saying swamp for sale. They removed and mitigated the wetlands where they had swamp. Somehow legally, they were able to take that amount of land, of swamp land, and move it over here. There also are springs there. And I had hoped when I was on council to have reinforced pipes with the coating that would have been help with the soil, which is corrosive to the lines. So yes, there will be a lot more problems.
Is there any other citizen comments? Any more business to come before the Saline City Council? If not, our next meeting is on January 9th at 7:30 and January 23rd. We all wish everyone a happy holiday and safe travels if you're traveling. We need a motion to adjourn at 9:08.
So moved.
Move Gearba.
Second.
Second Peters. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.